Oh, thank you, Jake.
All right, we're back, and it's finally back. It's COMP3025 Mobile and Pervasive Computing on the winter 2016 semester, and I'm going to be talking about the final projects today. We should have talked about them last week, but last week we were here. It was supposed to be Easter, so we're kind of put off. So I've changed the timeline and some of the requirements that we normally would have. I can't normally have the same timelines if I have less time, right? So we're going to talk about this right now. So there's two options that I'm going to be proposing to you. One is a game option. Because you guys have a game and simulation, I'm trying to be light on you guys in terms of, can you swing something with your game and simulation and produce a build for a mobile device? So if you wanted to do like if you're already working on a project for game, the idea is, could you produce something like that, a different view or whatever for what you're doing with us here? Because as long as you produce it for Android or iOS, it suits my needs, right? It takes care of my mobile and pervasive computing kind of idea and kind of kills two birds with one stone. However, you may not be interested in that. Or maybe you're too far down the line with your game project and you don't want to make a build for iOS or Android. And that's fine. So we're going to talk about the utility app option first. Let's talk about this. Two options. The first part is due Monday, right? Which is April 4th coming up. And all I want from that is your first draft of an external app document, almost like a concept. Today it's app day. So what we're going to do is we're going to gather in groups, and I want you to pick some partners. One or two is what I want you to work with. So one or two other people, so it's not a singleton project. You can work within a group, right, to produce something. And the option is by Monday, I want your concept in place. That's worth 10%. So you're planning your concept. When is it going to be done? What is it going to look like? What's the app going to be about? As an example. By the way, this is exactly similar. If I was going to look at the game concept, so whether it's an app, your utility app or your game, as an example, your game concept and your first draft of your external game document and your menu scene, we'll talk about that, would be required for Monday. For your game, you can use Unity, Unreal, some game engine of your choice. If you really want to do it in Swift or Android native, you can. I don't recommend it if you're going to make a game. Only because of the time frame, not because it can't be done, right? Like if you're going to use Sprite Kit or Game Kit or whatever for iOS, if you wanted to go that route, or if you wanted to use And Engine as an example for Android, go ahead. I don't recommend. I think it's, you're better off using something like, just from a time frame perspective, you don't have time. Use Unity, use Unreal, and produce something that's compliant with Android or iOS. It's up to you. So that's your option. But if you're going to do a game, your first draft is due on Monday, right? So tell me what you're building and all that kind of stuff. It's got to be within reason, and it's got to kind of finish within a few weeks altogether. All right. Part 2 is due the week after on Monday. So Monday, I'm doing it Mondays strategically because on Fridays when we get together, we're going to be actually doing some work here in class together, and we can solve some problems. We're going to use these weeks over the next couple weeks at least as workshop weeks. To try and give you guys time to work on it here in class. That's what I'd like to try and do, right? And so we can solve some problems together, because some of the stuff we're going to be doing is there's going to be some challenges, especially if you want to try and do things native in Android. As an example, I'm guessing most of you will try and do things in Android if you're going to build a utility app, right? And the same thing goes if you're building a game. There's going to be some challenges with that too, trying to make it all work and everything else with the time frame that we have. So again, for part 2, you have for your utility, we'll talk about this in a second, you have a primary screen for your utility and a secondary screen, secondary activity, if you will, right? So the primary activity or primary screen, that's why I didn't want to say what it was, because again, it could be iOS, would be something else, right? Your storyboard. And basic app mechanics, like how the actual basic function of April, which is not the coming Monday, but the Monday after that, right? So that's when it was. So you have kind of a week in terms of getting things together. For your game, you're only producing one level, okay? So there's not like multiple levels or anything like that. For your app, you have basically 2 activities, a primary and secondary, right? So it's going to be pretty straightforward. The great thing is you're working within a group, so you have some extra horsepower. So you don't have to, you don't have to kill yourself to produce this thing. It's you and one or two other people, like, that you can get together and say, okay, I want to produce this app. Everyone should have their own job. Like, for example, if one person is dealing with, functionality, another person is dealing with the external document, another person is dealing with, the UI. There's enough bodies and stuff to get some stuff built. And you can also partner program or pair program to make things go over the next few weeks. It's not something that's going to be outside of your wheelhouse and outside of your time frame if you work in groups. If you're trying to do it alone, I can honestly say that you're going to be challenged, because these apps, even if you build a simple app in a couple weeks with testing and the documentation requirements and everything else, it's going to be too much. I don't recommend it. I'm not going to force you, though, to work in groups, because that's always, sometimes that can lead into disaster, right? Tom, you forced me to work in a group, and then now look at me, right? So I'm not going to do that, but I caution you that working by yourself is very challenging when it comes to producing something like this. So your final week will be the exam week, week 14, right? Well, we have that's due on Monday. So your final app and tuning, fine-tuning, and everything else for both the game option, which is your instruction and game end screens, are due the final week. The last day of classes that we get together, right? I'm toying with the idea of doing presentations, right? Where you get a mark for presentations, right? Now it's either that or going to be an exam. So it's whatever you guys want, whatever you guys choose to do. Huh? I thought that's what you want to go with, right? I'm not going to force it on you, right? I'm not going to push you, but presentation means you have to kind of, and I'll detail that as we go forward. That's why I haven't put it up yet. Otherwise, it would have been another part. When you do presentations, that means you have to be ready to present. You got 10 minutes to pitch your app, right? Pretty much do everything you have to do. And with enough groups, if we have I have to kind of see how many groups there are. We should be able to finish everything in 3 hours. And what I'll do is I'll mark you on the spot, so everything is done on that day. So you've got everything you go by that. And what I'm going to do is, as we get together over the next few weeks, I'm going to sit down with you individually. So, example, next week I'm going to mark your concept in-house as we sit down. I'm going to sit down with each team, and I'll mark you right there, right? So your concept for your first 10%. And then the next week after that, I'll mark your prototype, your first working level right away. And then the following week, you'll have your mark for your fine tuning, and then I'll also give you your mark for your presentation. So you'll be up to date with everything from this semester and last semester. Okay, so that's what's going to happen. And the great thing is I'll be able to give you feedback as we go, and I'll also talk about your other assignments and other work that you've been doing as well. All right, so bear with me as we go through this process. Those are the three things that the schedule that we're working it out, and I've broken it out in Blackboard the same way. So if you look at Blackboard, the first draft of your external document is due on part 1, but I want your final draft to be in part 3. So. And part 2, you should have another draft. Like there should be a draft. Your external document should kind of be an evolving thing that you carry forward from submission to submission. Yeah.
You just want one person to hand it in out of the group?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Is there any easy way to port a game from Unreal Engine to like a native Android app?
Absolutely.
Wow.
You just go to you go to build. You build it. I'll show it to you. I'll show you how to do it. Right. But that's why I'm suggesting it. If you guys are already doing game simulation, right, it can kind of be built, kind of killing two birds with one stone, right, as long as you satisfy my requirements. I know you guys are busy, that's why. And the great thing is you'll have the experience of actually creating something on Android or iOS, either it's a game or an app or whatever you want to do. I want to give you, so for Kelly asked me today, can I just do whatever I want kind of thing, right? Kelly, yes, in some ways, yes, you can, but with some criteria.
I actually say it like that.
No. But I had to put in like my own spin to it. So let's take a look at the app concept. So if you're going to build an app, here's what I'm going to accept: a calorie counting app, a tutorial app, a cookbook recipe app, an alarm clock app, something like that, which is very simple and straightforward that you can knock off in a couple weeks. Okay, but I'm talking about you got 3 people working on it. I want a nice UI, right? Because it's not, I want a good concept. I want to see what it looks like and everything else ahead of time. And it's got to have some functionality. It can't be like error-ridden with 3 people working on it. There's just no way, right? So I won't accept those kind of things. Now notice what I said here is like, please keep in mind the final presentation, it's worth 10% of your final mark and so on. I put it in there because I want to add this I wanted to have an option of putting in a final presentation. I kind of put it in the documentation. Not sure if I'll still do that yet. We have to still talk about it. I want to see what's going to happen after today, right? And then see if the final presentation is the viable option. So it's in here, but worst case scenario, we may have to do an exam. All right, I don't want to. I'd like to do a presentation, but I want to talk with everybody first, group by group. So one thing I want you guys to do today is find your group, who you're going to work with, talk about your concepts, start putting together your documentation. That's what's due today. And then by Monday, I mean, half of it, I mean, I'll give you time in class today to do that. So by Monday, you're ready to go, right? So you get your 10% and it's done, all right? So let's not like spend too much time doing other things today. That's the only thing I want to talk about today, organization of your project and who you're working with. And I'm highly encouraging you to work with somebody, all right? Don't work on your own on this one. So from a utility app, it must include at least 3 activities, 3. The first one is a splash screen, right? So some kind of screen that pops up first to say what your app is about. You're going to have your main app interface activity, whatever that is, right, and functionality-wise. And then there's a secondary activity that accesses data or performs some kind of alternate function. Like, for example, you have an options screen, right, or some kind of other screen that gives you, modifies the primary activity somehow, okay? So that's what your secondary activities are about. We talked about moving from one activity to the other with Android last time we were together with Intents. So it's very similar to that. You just have to do different intents or moving from one activity to the next, okay? So again, very simple. We're not looking at a very complex app here for your utility app. If we want some functionality, it's got to be an app of your own. And I want you to think about this as potentially something you're going to add to your portfolio, right? Something that you're going to say, hey, I made an app. It's an Android app or an iOS app if you want to go there. And which is totally acceptable, by the way. If you're a Mac person, if there's anybody in the room that's a Mac person and wants to do an iOS app, if you want to work in the other room there, 8251, there's still options to go in there and make your Mac app if that's what you want. I'm not gonna limit you. When I say Mac, iOS is what I'm talking about, right? So then you kind of come up with that. And if you look at the details, it kind of details the marks in terms of functionality, everything else. I want you to definitely have a bitmap graphic that kind of goes on the app itself with your logo. So if you and your partner are working together, it kind of comes up with whatever your logo of the quote unquote company you have in that comes up. Your splash screen must be displayed for a few seconds, and then the splash screen will launch the main activity after a short delay, that delay that you're talking about. And then your main app interface has your main functionality. So it's going to display information that's stored in the app, whether it's tutorial app, cookbook app, alarm clock. Does the information have to be persistent? No. I don't expect you to tie into a back-end database here. It's a prototype, guys. Right? So if your app, it works and you show some mock data, it's okay for this app. And the reason why is, again, time frame. We don't have a time frame. We don't have, if I had a couple more weeks to give you, I would say, yeah, tie it into a back-end database. No, we don't have time for that, right? So let's just make it so that it looks nice and so that it has some functionality and that there is some kind of data that you can access as mock data, yeah.
Are these assignments that people will show?
Absolutely not. I would like it to be, yeah. It'd be nice, right? But no, it's not able to rules, Joe. That'd be a big waste of my time. So your secondary interface, it kind of talks about how to configure the prime function of the app. So example, maybe enter the daily calorie goal for the calorie counting app, or select the order of each tutorial section to be displayed, or select the units of measure for the cookbook recipes, or select military time for the alarm clock, or something like that. There's some kind of options you're going to have in your secondary app that are going to affect the primary screen, okay? The secondary screen to affect the primary screen. After the configurations are completed, the user will be returned to the main app interface activity, and those changes will be applied, okay? But it's not going to be, again, if you're going to exit the app, do I expect them to be persistent? No, I don't, right? Why? Because, again, it takes extra effort to make that work, and it's just like me getting you to save your game. Not going to happen, right? Saving and loading games, pausing games, and all that kind of stuff there's a lot of logic involved in making it all work beyond the scope of blueprinting or anything like that, right? So please try not to do that kind of stuff or plan it. A little bit of internal documentation is what I'm looking for as normal. And an external document that has, very simple one, by the way, that has a company logo, table of contents, full description of your app, several labeled sketches, wireframes of what your app is going to look like. That's what's due on Monday. Yeah? Is that what you're asking your question, or is that?
Oh, no.
Yeah, so I want your sketches. So and I'm talking about like do a sketch, take a picture of it, put it in your document, like literally like that. If you want to put it, put it on a whiteboard, draw it out, take a picture of it, slap it into your document. That's what I want. I want a plan of what it's going to look like, your final app for Monday. Of course, share everything on GitHub to demonstrate version control best practices, and that's really it in a nutshell. There's some options here. The app uses an external database as an option. If you really want to go there, you got the gumption, right? I would say the motivation to figure that out. Absolutely, go up to you. If you want to use SQLite or some kind of an external MySQL database or Mongo store or whatever, it's up to you. The app includes additional activities and that adds functionality. For example, weight loss tracking for the calorie counting app, YouTube videos that display inside the tutorial app, and blah, blah, blah. Go ahead, you can put those in there and I'll give you bonus marks. I don't expect that to happen from a time frame perspective, but there's always opportunities for you to have bonus marks. So that's your utility app. And the other one is the game app. So very similar to the utility app, it's a little bit more complex. And I'll tell you right now, from a challenge perspective, if you're going to start from scratch with your game app, it's pretty heavy duty compared to, that's why, again, when you're working with 3 people or one or two people more than just yourself, it can be done. And what I'm looking for is a splash screen, a game control screen, some kind of main game screen, a game end screen, and a scoring system. So lots of stuff going on here. But if you're already working on a game for game and simulation, then this isn't much of a stretch here, right? Again, you can use things with, you can create it with Xcode and native game engine if you want, or you can use something like Unity or Unreal, right? Or some other game engine that kind of ports out to iOS. Now, Unity has a really easy port to go from, if you want to build, you can build it across multiple application environments. You want to build it for Mac or Windows, no problem. You want to build it for iOS or Android, no problem. You can do all the builds in one for Unity, not a problem at all. And the same thing goes with Unreal. The only challenge with Unreal is you have to kind of gear your game towards towards a mobile build from the get-go. If you notice, there's some options when you start off your Unreal project, and one of them is, what am I building this for? Am I building it for a desktop app, or is it a mobile app? But it's easy to export them into to Android. The creation process, the baking process. All right, so you get a splash screen, very similar. A control screen. When I say a control screen, what I'm talking about is a menu, right? A main game screen activity, a game end screen activity, and all that stuff is very similar to what we did with the app that we talked about. And the game control screen has buttons and kind of a menu to kind of say, okay, do I want to start this game as an example, or do I want to go to the instructions? What do I want to see, or do I want to end the game? That would be your menu, right? And then your main game screen activity, would have some components. For example, some kind of, enemies or hazards. It doesn't have to be enemies. You don't have to make a shooting type game or killing game. You could make a puzzle game. I want you to avoid it, but only because puzzle games are very challenging from a logic perspective. Sometimes, you can write yourself into a corner with that. But you don't have to make enemies that chase you around. You can make hazards that you have to jump over or overcome somehow, right? For your game. So that's totally fine. Of course, there's a game end screen activity that allows you to start the game over again if you want to, or end the game. And then, again, similar to what we had in the utility app, internal documentation, and then an external document that's a little bit more complex. And that's why I said that this game option is a little bit more beefy in terms of demand. But then again, you're going to combine it. If you do this, if you're smart, you combine it with your game and simulation project so that you can have another build, right? So it shouldn't be a big stretch for you guys if you want to work on that. Share it on GitHub, of course. Everything's got to be shared on GitHub. And there's some option here in terms of a soundtrack and sound effects for appropriate times and so on. I don't expect any kind of animation for the game, so you don't have to go too crazy in terms of animations or sound mixing or anything like that. It's got to be very basic, but it's got to work on your platform of choice, whether it's iOS or Android. Okay. Questions about these projects? Again, over the next 3 weeks. So Monday's your first due date. The following Monday is the second one, and the third Monday, the last Monday that we're together is the final one. And then on the Friday, when we get together, it's either a presentation, we have to kind of decide this as a team, or it's going to be an exam, right? So you guys have to decide what you want to do. Either way, you know, we'll wrap up everything nicely, and over the next few weeks, we're gonna use this week, next week, and the week after as kind of workshop weeks. We kind of get together and talk about your game. So I'm gonna give you time in class to do it. So please don't miss class. That would be silly, because I'm gonna be reviewing you guys every single time we get together, and I want to try and mark you guys in your in. So if you're gonna miss class, at least I'll put it out there for you guys, because I know it's going to happen, because I know things are, you know, resolving, and there's lots of different stuff going on to other projects. At least have your team members, other team members there if you can't make it. If the whole team is missing, that would be very bad. That's all I can tell you.
How bad?
Bad. Yes.
What if they sent you a video of it?
A video of?
Of their each part?
No. Yes.
You're teaching here in the summer.
Am I teaching in the summer?
Yeah.
So far, it looks like I'm doing COMP3025, which is enterprise computing. I don't know about anything else yet, and so far that's it, right? So it's just no. He's actually been promoted and doing other things that are more interesting, right? That's what it is. Yeah. He's actually. I'm inheriting some stuff from him, and you know he's actually going to get a summer off for once in a blue moon, right? Yeah, I know, right? He might even travel and do some interesting things. Maybe he's going to go to, you know, the sunny south somewhere. Who knows, right? But something that's more interesting than being in class, right? Huh?
What are the possibilities?
Right, that's right, Rich. I was hoping that you'd chime in. Okay. What else? What else, guys? Any other questions you guys have for this one? I'm sure there are a lot of questions. So this is the first activity for today. I want you to find your partners and start putting together your external documentation right now, okay? Because all we're doing today is working on project, okay? So think of this as a mini capstone that we're putting together. It's due in a few weeks. Again, it's up to 3 people working together, okay? Please don't make it a group of 4. There's just no room for that. There's not enough of meat for you to program in a group of 4. So make it a group of 3, please, max, okay? And then we'll go from there. I'm going to stop recording this. This recording here is simply just to give you all the details you need for your final project. So please use this recording to answer some of your questions. You know, and again, take a look at Blackboard. All the details for that I've talked about here are up on Blackboard in different sections of your submissions.